Al Campbell, congratulations on your novel, The Keepers. Oh my goodness, it has been lavished with praise by so many people. Emily Maguire, Annabelle Crabb, Nikki Gemmell. Oh my goodness, it is just so beautifully written. So much I want to unpack here. But let's just start with, for readers who haven't got their hands on a copy yet, and they should, can you tell us what it's about?
I can try, Valerie. I'm really, really bad at elevator pitches, but it's about a woman called Jay who has a rather rough start in life. She comes from a background of abuse. She grows up to have her own two boys, twins, who see the world rather differently as the world sees them. Her best friend is a half real chum by the name of Keep, very real to her. And something happens, and Jay starts to wonder if perhaps, in order to be a good mother, she might have to become a very, very bad one.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to discuss here because there's so many issues that you cover. There are so many different types of characters in the book. Let's first start with what made you want to write this novel.
Well, I think, as I might have indicated previously, I kind of wrote a novel without really meaning to. Having listened to Val and Al for so long, and I think it was Al who first raised, or maybe it was you, Val, Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way,
yes.
and her concept of the morning pages. And I think that was way back in 2015 when I first either heard of it or bought the book. And I was in a bit of a grim spot and in my life, and I was very, very tired and very, very housebound and lonely and no money and barely hanging on to the house, which I didn't end up managing to do. And I heard about these morning pages and I thought, let's give that a go. Let's just get me out of my head if we can. And I started doing them. And, you know, the whole writing by hand across the page, and therapy, the therapeutic dividend that's meant to have. And I really loved it. I really loved the routine and the process. And I did feel like it got me out of my head, even though what I was writing about sometimes was what was in my head. But I also wrote about anything, just anything. Sometimes I wrote about William and Catherine. Sometimes I wrote about the construction and the pool being built with the neighbours across the street. It was anything. It was sometimes just social commentary, rantings, words. But I kept doing them and kept doing them. And then my son got very, very sick in 2017, and we pretty much spent the next 18 months in hospital, very, very long stretches, weeks at a time. So I had my trusty little laptop so I could read, and I just wrote because, you know, anyone who's ever spent time in hospital with their children knows that you don't sleep. And I wrote in this sort of fever dream. I just spewed. It just went. And oh gosh, I came out with an awful lot of words.
Wow.
And yes, and I thought, looks a bit like a book, maybe. From there.
That's incredible. So for listeners who may not be familiar with Morning Pages is a suggestion, a practice by Julia Cameron, where you write 3 just crappy pages of what spews out of your head every morning by hand in a notebook. I love it. I don't do it every day, but I have periods where I'll do it for a month and then I'll not do it for a month, or I'll do it for 3 months and then I'll do it. So it's something that is a very, very very useful exercise. It's not just therapeutic, because sometimes you don't necessarily need it. Sometimes it's just wonderful clarification of things that are going on in your head. And you don't have to write a story. You don't have to write a piece of fiction. You literally just, whatever comes out of your head, you start writing. It's great. I never really did them in the morning. I always did them at some other times. But tell me, so then you just started writing and you think, okay, well, I might now have a book. Did you actually start writing a fictional story that was brewing in your head? That's quite a leap, going from morning pages to a book. What was your intention during those 18 months of writing?
Well, another thing that happened along the way, midway through 2016, so before my son got sick, but I read a column in the weekend paper that Nikki Campbell writes.
Yeah.
And she wrote this wonderful column about writers who came to writing later in life. And
yes,
writers like Annie Proulx and Elizabeth Joly and Anita Bruckner, who
I
think I've
remember
read.
that column. I remember
Yes,
that article.
yes. And I thought, really? Annie Proulx didn't start writing until she was 52 or something? And it just, how sometimes you hear the things you're meant to hear, and,
Yes.
there's that synchronicity or serendipity or something going on. And I wrote to her. I emailed her. I never do these sorts of things. And I just wrote to her and said, wow, that column just really spoke to me, and thanks. And well, maybe I will. And so that was sort of rocking around in my head. But I still was just doing the morning pages, and it really was unpublishable, just stuff. But then I think things started to form when I was I don't know, it was a fever dream of writing when I was in the hospital, because my son was sick. He just lay there. He didn't want to do anything. And we were in an isolation room almost all the time, because he caught everything that you can catch in a hospital all the time. So we were always on our own. Like I said, it's just the worst writing residency you'd ever want. But there we were. And I think, I've got that. I've always liked words. I'm a huge reader. And so, it just almost sort of on its own. And I write with Scrivener, and, my publisher would say, this is not a good thing, because she's not a fan, but I love it. I love it. And
yes, it's very good.
I write in those, I don't want to say erratic, but it is, as those are bursts where just something will come. And, Scrivener can just boom straight in, new scene.
Yeah.
And I had 135,000 words.
Wow.
And it was and I thought, I can stitch this together. I think.
Incredible. And so in terms of your characters, because you've got Jay, who is the mother of these twins who are teenagers. You've got teenagers, you've got adults, and you've got kids yourself, so that's not too far removed from your life. And you've got this incredible domestic environment that you've captured so beautifully. The twins are that they've got they're on the spectrum, right?
Yes.
And they're very different from each other. Very different from each other. They've got very distinct characters and very different ways in which they react to the world. So they're very well formed, because they're very clear who each of them are. How did you go about creating your characters from a practical point of view? Obviously, they started in your head, but then to ensure that you got them consistent, and then to develop them into their specific characteristics and behaviours, what did you do?
I think I'm just lucky in that I'm a bowerbird, as a lot of writers are. And obviously I know, and, been in the same space as a lot of families with children with disabilities, varying disabilities. And I tried to be, I didn't just want to depict autism spectrum disorder. I sort of wanted to expand that out a bit so that people could relate to all sorts of things. I mean,
yes,
the character Frank's a bit portly, a bit chubby, and so picked on for that. And he has a stutter, which my son actually had a stutter very like that, but it sort of went away. Well, we therapied it out, but stutters are really these days quite easy to get rid of, but for some people. But I think I just had a very firm idea of where I wanted to take the characters, and so they sort of wrote their way into it, and that's also part of my process. Is I write my way in. So in fact, Frank was a bit different to start with. He in fact had, rather than the way he's presented now, he actually had a very large birthmark on his face. But that was, changed to become more consistent with the autism spectrum. So yeah, they just talked to me and formed, and as we went, and developed as we went.
So in terms of your characters, Al, I understand that you had an interesting way of naming some of them.
I certainly did, Valerie. Well, I'm not frightened to say I'm an absolutely rabid football hooligan, an Essendon fan. And so when I was writing the book, I assumed, as you do when you're writing your first novel, I guess, that no one will ever read it but you and the dog. So when I had to name a character, when I had to name a bad character, I gave them Carlton football player names. And when I had to name all the rest, I gave them all names of the Essendon Football Club players, past and present. And well, I had fun doing that. And then when University of Queensland Press, bought the book, and we sort of did a bit of work, and then I finally met Aviva Tuffield, who's my publisher, and she's based in Melbourne, and she came up during one of the brief moments they weren't in lockdown, and we met. And as we were finishing our meeting, I thought I should probably say something about the whole Essendon thing, And I said, because Aviva's very posh, and I said, look, there's something about the characters' names I should probably tell you. I named them all after. And she said, oh, and I could see the blood draining from her face. And the darling editor who was there, I could see the blood draining from her face too. And Aviva said, you've named them all after real people? And I said, I've named them all after Essendon players. And she went, oh, thank God, that's all right. And I said, is it? And she said, well, of course. Well, what's the problem? And I said, well, anyone out there who's, a footy fan or an Essendon fan who reads the book, well, they'll know. And she said, oh, Elaine, Essendon supporters don't read novels. And I was terribly offended. And I said, well, I know one who does. So isn't that hilarious?
That's incredible.
My beloved footy team gets to have little Easter eggs all the way through the book.
Oh my God. So, if you're an Essendon fan, you've got lots and lots of things that you can look out for in The Keepers by Al Campbell. That's absolutely fantastic. I love it.
Go Bombers.
So when you wrote your 135,000 words in the 18 months while you're in hanging out in the hospital, at what point, there must have been some point that you thought, this is going to be a story. I'm assuming that you didn't write a whole 135,000 words and think, oh, now it's a story. At some point you thought there's a direction here and I'm going to go on this arc and,
Yes. And in fact, I think it was literally the week we landed in hospital, I heard back from the Australian Writers' Centre that Kathy Tasker was going to take me on as a mentee.
Right.
The timing could not have been more wretched. Okay. I thought, oh, should I do this or should I postpone? And then I thought, oh, it's one of those, if I let this slip, I probably will it'll be gone. And Kathy was wonderful and terribly accommodating. And the one thing that she really did for me was, because I only showed her what I thought was showable. And that was this character of Keep, which is in the very first chapter. And I did have terrible self-doubt about him. And I thought, it's just too wacky. It's too wacky. It doesn't belong. And her feedback was, oh no, you're quite wrong there. In fact, more of him, please. And if the rest of it could be as interesting, well, you're a winner. And having that kind of endorsement for my thinking, that sort of set me off on that, right, there's this woman and she's got trauma, and I was depicting it in a very cliched sort of way up to that point. She was a pill-popping alcoholic. And as I was writing it, I thought, God, I'm bored. And if I'm bored, the reader's going to be bored. You know what I mean? That's what they say. If you're bored writing it, everyone's going to be bored. And I thought, this is so done. It's overdone. It's overcooked. And then suddenly Keith arrived in my head and I thought, hello, who are you? And I wrote him.
Wow.
And then set him aside thinking, oh, perhaps that's another story for another time. And then I put it in and showed Kathy and she was like, yes, keep him. And I thought, oh, that's right. We throw the pills and the alcohol away. He is all of that siphoned off.
Wow. Because it is such an unusual and specific premise. Yeah. But it works. It's so beautifully written and you immediately get it into it and you immediately want to know what is happening with each of these characters, which obviously is what drives you on. So what you also did the Write Your Novel program at the Australian Writers Centre, is that right?
Yes. So that was when I got Rupert back on his feet, and he was because he missed a whole 18 months of school. So he started to go back to school part-time until he was strong enough to go back full-time. And that's when I thought, look, let's have a look at this thing that I've just, this massive thing, all these words. And I thought I need someone to look at this because I could be completely delusional and, well, I'll have written a novel and just sit in the drawer, and a lot of people haven't even done that. But I'll try it and see. And it was just the best thing I ever did. And I remember in the sort of prelude to the course hearing your words, in one of the tutorials say, you get so much out of critiquing other people's work, which of course I had never done in my life. And not having done it, I thought, I don't know, Valerie, if that's actually going to be this. And it was because it's like, when you try to learn another language, you learn so much more about your own. And it was exactly the same. And when you look at other people's work and thought, that doesn't work, but why? You have to be able to tell a person why. And this really works, but why? You can't just say, oh, it's lovely, I love it. You have to say why. And so then you turn it back. Why does this work? Why did Kathy think this worked, this character? And why do I think this doesn't work? And I can see this in my own writing. And so I need to address this in what I'm doing. And I didn't have an ending, Valerie, which is why I kept writing. I was writing into the void. I just kept writing and writing and writing and thinking the end will come. And it didn't. And it wasn't until I did the course, found the ending, and then I could shift everything around, thought that's the ending, so I'm going to, just because it's a structure where it's all sort of forward and back, so all of that got shifted around. The end, showed it to Angela Slater, who I already knew outside of the AWC courses. And again, that was because I so admire her and she's so experienced, and I thought,
she's fantastic.
What's she going to say to this? And Bernadette Foley had already given me really good feedback. Fantastic. Sort of said, just let's get out there and do this. And then I showed it to Angela and she said, let's get out there and do this. And I can suggest these two people. Let's start here. First one said no, second one said yes.
And they said yes only 5 months after you finished the Write Your Novel course.
Yes. And in fact, they said yes 1 week after receiving it.
Wow, that's incredible. But I can absolutely see why. Now, here's the thing. So I understand that obviously when you were in the 18 months hanging out in the hospital, you were writing, there was lots of opportunity to write. Once you got out of that, what stage was it in? Were you still writing, or were you by that time revising for the bulk of it?
Yeah, definitely. I was in the what is all of this and where's it going, and remembering I still didn't have the ending. And so when I got my son back to school, that's when I thought, right, I've got to be, if I'm serious, I've got to be serious and treat this like it's a job, it's a task. And that's when I read or I heard about Toni Morrison's practice of getting up at 4. She was a single mother, getting up at 4 a.m. to write. And I thought, all right, I'm not a night person. I know that my night writing is rubbish. And I thought, well, let's try the morning. And it really worked. And I'm one of those people, not helpful, but I just need quiet when I write. I wish I could be one of those people who's, Pearl Jam on or well, there are some like
Pearl Jam, but okay.
and or writing cafes and things. Yes. I can't. Yeah. So and also I can't. I've got to be in the house like a lot of the time. We're not at school and things all the time. So getting up at 4 to 7, it's kind of like those people who run. Wish I was one of them. And they say, well, I get out and do the run, and at least I've done the run if the rest of the day goes pear-shaped. Well, I'm the same. I've got up, I've done my writing. I only have a modest word aim of 500 words in a session, every morning.
So how long would you write? From 4 a.m, you aim for 500 words. How long you write for?
Yeah, I write for the 3 hours, but I'm one of those, though. I know Angela is a great fan of the vomit in aisle 8. I'm not a vomiter. I do use the word spew a lot, but I spew 3 sentences and then I tinker, and then I write the next. It just doesn't work for me to go bleh, and I'll come back to it later. Yeah. So those, I often get between 500 and 800. So I just kind of figure 5 is my bottom number.
Yeah.
Anything above that's a bonus, and I just sort of tinker and polish and fuss as I go, and I feel then that those 500, they're done, and the next day is the next 500.
That's incredible. You write for 3 hours from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Yes.
Every day, 7 days, 5 days, what?
Well, you see, if there were an alternate universe, Al, I'd never stop. I'm shocking. I just love it.
That's great. There's nothing wrong with that.
I love it. I don't want to do anything. Don't want to leave the house. Don't want to wash my hair. Don't want to do anything. Just want to write. And but that Al doesn't exist. So yeah, I do, and it's done, and I feel like I've done the thing for me, and then the rest of the day can go off in all of its erratic directions, which invariably it will. But at least I've done my bit.
That is incredible. So are you, now that this book is out there in the world, are you writing your next one?
Yes.
So that's what you're doing at the moment. From 4 to 7, you're writing your second novel.
Well, at the moment, I'm still sort of writing things to do with the keepers. You sort of write pieces for publication in papers and things. Mm-hmm. So that's been, and I will admit, we've been going through, my son's he's never been a good sleeper, and we've been going through a phase with that where he's actually not going to sleep until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my.
So that's thrown that out, and this is why I've got that when he sleeps I can do my 4 till 7, and when he doesn't, I've just got to exist and put one foot in front of the other as the days go on. We're emerging from that, so I'm going to be able to reinstate my writing.
So
again.
When you're back in your routine, then what do you do during the day?
Well, so I've got people often think, when you've got kids at school, you're sort of free between 9 and 3. My boy goes to a special school, so he's got shorter hours anyway. And my other boy, my older boy, who's also on the spectrum, has been home with me full time. He's finished high school. He's going to try and tackle a course at TAFE this year, so he'll be out of the house to do some things. So that will be good, because there's therapies across both the boys. So I often pick Rupert up early and we go off to speech pathology or what have you. And then Fraser has his therapies that we sort of do during the day. Rupert's at school. Yes. So, and then I work as an editor and a proofreader for a uni and edit finance papers that I don't understand at all. But yeah, so I fit in work where I can.
You obviously have firsthand experience with kids who are on the spectrum, and that's also why it's so incredibly realistic and yet so beautiful, because the love for these kids is so obvious. What did you have any hesitations in tackling what can be a complex subject that many people don't necessarily understand? Did you have any hesitations at all on how it would be depicted, or did you just write and just write what was coming out of your heart?
I did just write, and reflecting on what the first point, I'm very much of the view that, especially with autism, but more with disability generally, when there's a saying, when you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism, because they are all very different. I have two boys on the spectrum. They could not be more different, just like the two characters in the book, different in different ways, similar in some. So I really just wanted to write a story about those particular people, so that they're characters in themselves. They're not meant to be just like Rain Man is not like every autistic person, and the boy in Atypical is not like every autistic person. And so I just wanted to write them as characters. I wanted to write a book and not a manifesto, even though sometimes the two, and with all writing, really, I mean, people who write novels about the environment, it can sometimes feel like their manifesto or what have you. But I wanted to write a book that people would read as a book, just a book about characters, but also that other readers who have an experience of this sort of life could go, oh, yes, I can relate to this. Because people do like to see themselves sometimes it reflected, don't they? Like, well, what they've gone through, what they know, or how they're feeling.
So before you started that that period of morning pages, which kind of helped kickstart this period of your life, did you have dreams of becoming a writer?
Well, like a lot of writers, I've got that story of when my precious school teacher stood up and read my nurse spy story out, World War II story. I wish I still had it. I bet it would be a laugh. And she said, you should be a writer one day, Elaine. And you know how you just don't forget some things. And I also loved her so much that she could have told me to sort of be a ditch digger and I would have been. But and then I had this period once, because I've always been a drifter. I mean, just a drifter. And I was in Sydney and I got this temp job. It's like the longest temp job ever. And I was working for this sort of factory plant thing, this great big electronics plant factory thing on the river at Meadowbank near the station. And it was huge. It was a huge complex and very old. And the company was in the process of sort of selling off parts of the company and moving. But they had this big old switchboard that used to ring about once every 5 days, and they needed someone to be there when this phone rang. And they were happy to pay me an hourly rate. And they said, do you knit? And I said, no. And they said, well, you'll have to bring a book or something because there's nothing to do. But when the odd courier pops in, there was nobody there. It was derelict. It was defunct. And I was there all alone in this gigantic reception area all day, every day. It was quite creepy and surreal, answering this ancient PABX switchboard when it rang once every other day. So when I was there, I thought, well, I'll do something. So I went to a secondhand bookstore and bought myself a book on how to touch type. I taught myself how to type. And then I sat there every day writing short stories, which I would probably be dreadful. But I sat there for 2 years.
Oh my God.
2 years in this huge moribund, abandoned plant factory thing, and wrote short stories which were really dreadful. But I think, it sort of was a little bit of preparatory work for where I've ended up.
Oh my goodness, but kind of like what a great opportunity in
I
the
know
end.
again another bizarro world
Yeah.
writing residence, wasn't it?
Yes. That is really, yeah, you've got unique writing residences.
Isn't that funny?
Oh my
Yeah.
God. So what did you find as the most challenging thing about writing The Keepers?
Finding the end.
Yeah, how did you find it in the end then if
Well,
you kept on writing into the void?
what happened. There's a lady out there, Mel Thomas, I think. Thank you. When it came toward the end of our Write Your Novel, and we have to sort of submit our manuscripts to each other, I hadn't got to the point where it was about 60,000 words. That's all I had that I would show anybody.
Yeah.
Because I thought the rest was just bunkum at this stage. And a person in my group, Mel, said, "Oh, I love the way you've ended it. You haven't gone on and on." And I thought to myself, well, that's not the end. And then I read it and thought, oh, that's the end.
Oh, wow.
I know. And then I thought, I've got all this other stuff. I know exactly where to put it now. And there you are. How good's that?
So
you see, look at what the course did for me. There wouldn't even be a book, would there? Because I'd still be writing it and I'd be up to 400,000 words by now.
That's fantastic. And that's one of the benefits, right, of having somebody who is reading it with that eye and just knows, and has that feeling, that's the perfect ending.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great then. You didn't have to keep on writing.
No, I didn't. It was terrific. And then after I did see that was the end, it just was finished very quickly. It just was easy to finish.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And what was the most rewarding thing about writing The Keepers?
Well, I think that, that a whole lot of things, Valerie, very complex in that, I'm 56 and, I thought this ship had well and truly sailed. And even though it had been something that I had always sort of secretly, privately dreamed of, so I was just pleased to have finished a manuscript in the first place. And then, to actually have a book and a publisher, a proper, real, really wonderful publisher say, I think we're going to publish this. And I thought, wow, that's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, what a thing to do the thing that you love and have someone sort of say, I think it's all right. And then also to know that, I've written something very close to my heart. And yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. All right. So, I mean, what an achievement. It's going so well. People are talking about it everywhere.
Thank you.
It's just brilliant. Finally, then, what's your advice, your top 3 tips for listeners who want to get to where you are one day?
Well, I've probably got bizarro tips like everything.
That's okay. Bizarro's good.
Well, I know everyone says read and has said this all probably for every podcast you've ever had. And I say read, but I'm going to add something to that. I would say read interviews with and articles by the writers you read, the writers you admire. And for example, I just finished a book recently called The Last House on Needless Street by an English writer called Catriona Ward, UK writer. And I really liked it. It's very complex, very intriguing, multiple points of view, quite an act. It's terrific. And so I thought, I've never heard of her. I wonder what else she's written. So I looked up an article and she talked about how she had such dreadful trouble with this book and it wasn't working. And she thought, I should just bin it. But she had one of the points of view was a talking cat who actually was Christian and was very concerned about the Lord's plans for it. And was the cat living up to the Lord's expectations of her? And she thought, I can let go of everything, but not the cat. I've just got this odd little narrative about a talking cat. And once she decided the cat had to stay, I'm keeping the cat, and she sort of let everything else go, then it all just boom, and the book came together. And it just so happened that when I read this article, the book I'm currently writing, working on the manuscript, I've got a voice of an inanimate thing, not a cat, not an animal, but a thing that normally doesn't talk. And I can't shake it. And I keep thinking it's too out there. And then I read Catriona Ward's talk about a cat, and I thought, that's it. I'm keeping my mad voice and I'm just going to work with it. And it, do you know what I mean? It was once again one of those things where a writer I admire, I just happened to read the very thing I needed to hear.
Yep.
So I think you can learn an awful lot from just reading about the people that you read. The second thing is, which I've probably already talked a bit about, is a lot of writers are frightened. They think that there's got to be this clear-cut intentionality when they sit down at the keyboard. Don't be frightened of writing your way into the story. Like, don't think that you sit down and you're going to have these totally fleshed out characters. You're going to be really firm on all the metaphor that's going to convey your themes and all the rest. No, sit down. George Saunders, when he thought about writing Lincoln in the Bardo for 20 years, thought about it, and then decided he didn't want to be the bloke who on his gravestone had, the bloke who thought about writing his great book. And he said, because he thought it was very tricky, but he said, a quote, "I decided to take a run at it in exploratory fashion, no commitments." And I thought, it reminded me of Peter Carey, who just wrote and wrote and wrote thousands of words until he felt, right, here's the beginning. Here's my story. Not worried at all about, oh, I've wasted my time with these 20,000 words. Or no, it's never a waste, because I think every word you write makes you a better writer, and every word you cut makes for a better manuscript. I've definitely learned that through the publishing process, because I think the words you cut away is your way of refining the words that you actually keep. And the third one, well, that goes back to reading the dictionary in the defunct factory. When I get up at 4 and have my writing time, I start every single one. I was reading the dictionary, sorry. That's also another thing I did when I was in the factory. Taught myself to type and read the dictionary.
Like from A to Z?
I literally have the old World Book dictionaries that are 2 volumes, and each one's like that, and the print is microscopic. And I was there for 2 years, and I just every day just went through until I found words that I didn't know, and I'm like, oh, that's very interesting, and just kept. And I still do it. I still
read the dictionary.
Not read, but at the beginning of every writing session, I just open a page randomly
of the dictionary.
Yep. And and sometimes, and a word will just jump out, and it will just be nothing. It will be tarmac or owl, and I'll think, I'm going to work owl somehow, or owlish qualities, into this writing session.
Oh my God.
And I'll tell you, one day my eye fell on maisonette. Do you know what I mean by maisonettes? What we used to call duplexes,
right,
in my day, back when the earth was flat. A house cut in 2. And I thought, this was back in the early stages of The Keepers, and I knew that Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights was going to be a reference throughout the book, and there are 2 houses that the people live between in that. And I thought, maisonette. I'm going to have my character of Jay live between 2 houses, her grandparents and her mother's, 2 houses of horror. And that all became from my eye falling on the word. I know that sounds really kooky, but it's just my way of adding a bit of giggle juice to my writing session. It's like a mini sort of writing prompt, even though I'm writing the same piece of work. It's just like, just gives a little bump, a little swing this way and that. You never know where it might end up.
That's incredible. That is the most unique writing tip we have ever heard. So thank you. That's brilliant. Right. Anyway, oh my God, congratulations on The Keepers. So excited for you. And thank you so much for your time today,
Valerie. Thank you, Valerie. It's just been terrific.